having gay sex and getting gay married just to own the libs is a step further than I've ever seen.
The first thing that happened is dogs stopped barking at me. This is just how I think that God reveals himself to us.
Hello lovely people, my name is Emma, welcome back to my channel, welcome if you are new. I'm going a little bit off piece today. I was all prepared to bring you a super fun video about a flat earther who had been on British TV. It was gonna be larks, it will be larks, you'll just have to wait a bit longer. And then I read this news today, and I need to talk about it. This feels like a joke. Yes, per the title, Milo Yiannopoulos, ex-gay, far-right media troll, Christian activist, has been hired as a summer intern by Marjorie Taylor Greene. This feels like a joke. If you don't know who Milo Yiannopoulos is, do not worry, I'm going to spend this video talking about some of his controversies and who he is and why it was so nice to have him gone from the public eye for a while. So I learned this from PZ Myers over at Free Thought Blogs, and luckily for me, he was also in abject disbelief and did all the groundwork to double check that this is a real thing that happened and not an Onion article, because I wouldn't have believed it either. So yes, Milo posted on Telegram because he was one of the many conspiracy theorists and far-right hate personalities that was banned by Facebook in the big cull a year or two ago. Whenever Alex Jones and everyone got shunted off the platform for effectively hate speech, he was one of the ones that went with them. So he posted on Telegram a little picture of a badge on top of what looks like a Louis Vuitton bag, and the caption says, "I've finally been persuaded out of retirement, but my skills are a bit rusty, so the best role I could land was an unpaid internship with a friend. Pray for me." Marjorie Taylor Greene's office did indeed confirm to Forbes and other news sources that this is a legitimate thing that's happening. They've been seen together a lot recently. Before I jump into Milo Yiannopoulos and who he is and why he's terrible, I just want to give a quick warning. He is, and whether you want to call him far-right or alt-right, either way, I think he's commonly described as alt-right, so I guess I'll go with that. He is an alt-right commentator. He is ex-gay, we'll get into that. He is against gay rights. He's very Islamophobic, specifically. He's one of those Christians who has based a lot of his public life around hating Islam, with, of course, zero critical thought into the fundamental problems with his own faith. Whatever. Talking about Milo, we are going to touch on child abuse, comments that border on paedophilia. The definition of paedophilia is the thing in question with the controversy that he was in, so I'm not going to strictly say paedophilia, but basically uncomfortable sexual attitudes towards minors, and then also child abuse. So the warnings are there for you if you need them. As usual, I will divide this into chapters. I'll put those bits in their own chapters so you can just skip over them if you need. Let's talk about Milo. Milo Yiannopoulos was born and raised in Kent, which is where I went to do my undergraduate degree, which makes me very unhappy. He's described as a practicing Roman Catholic. He's done a lot of work for general Christian papers. He's also said that he's Jewish via his maternal grandmother. In terms of outward-facing practicing religion, he seems to mostly speak in favour of general Christianity. At least from what I've seen, he doesn't seem to specify Catholicism in his kind of religious activism. I'm going to share his education history with you, not because I'm being a snob or trying to be cruel, just because I think it's a little bit funny. School's rough. Sometimes people drop out, sometimes people get expelled. It happens to a lot of people, happens to good people. It's just not for everyone, right? I do think it's funny that his entire education history is he went to fancy grammar school for boys in Canterbury, that's where I used to live, from which he was expelled. Then he went to the University of Manchester, which he dropped out of. Then he went to Wolfson College, Cambridge, and was expelled. He became a US resident via a visa in 2017. So, sorry America, he's your problem now. Yiannopoulos spent many years as a writer. He started at a place called The Kernel, which I believe he co-founded, but it was shut down amidst allegations of unpaid wages when he was editor-in-chief and sole director of the parent company. Then they privately settled all the previous debts and reopened under a different name. Most famously and most controversially, he wrote for Breitbart News, which if you've heard of it, kind of explains everything about Yiannopoulos. If you haven't, it's a far-right British news source. I don't want to call it a news source, but it technically is. He was big involved in Gamergate. He used that a lot to attack women in general. Throughout his time at Breitbart and writing about this stuff, he became more and more of a prominent figure, like a figurehead for the alt-right. There was an email chain leaked that was published by, I think, BuzzFeed News, that basically showed that Yiannopoulos was getting a lot of his inspiration for stories from neo-Nazis and prominent alt-right figures. That report also suggested that Yiannopoulos had a personal fondness for using anti-Semitic personal passwords. Even Ben Shapiro condemned Yiannopoulos.
As you know, I have this long-running debate now with Milo Yiannopoulos. This is my big problem with Milo and his entire movement, is I think that Milo is not conservative. I don't think he knows anything about conservatism. I don't think he cares about the Constitution. He says this openly. I think that Milo cares about being a provocateur. Being a provocateur just for the sake of being a provocateur is worthless. Provoke in the name of something real and decent, and then I'll stand with you. Provoke in the name of just being a provocateur because you're violating taboos and you're a waste of my time.
They had like a feud. He has this thing where he consistently uses satire just as a concept, as a defense for what he's done. Loads of the headlines from Breitbart were just satire. One of his books used loads of lines from like pop songs and media without attribution, and he said that's on purpose because it's satire. This is a fun one. In 2016, Yiannopoulos set up his own scholarship grant, that's very nice of him, specifically for white men, to balance scholarships for women and minorities. They raised about $100,000 in a telethon for this white male scholarship program, and then a further $250,000 was pledged. And then, this was started in January, in August 2016, it was revealed that over $250,000 of that fund had mysteriously disappeared. He basically said, sorry, I mismanaged the money, but I didn't spend it. And the fund closed down in 2018. Yiannopoulos was interviewed at the start of 2016 on the podcast Drunken Peasants. Clips of this and other interviews were shared in February 2017 when Yiannopoulos was due to talk at the CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. A student was opposed to him being at that address, and so requested that these videos be posted.
Some of those relationships between younger boys and older men, the sort of coming-of-age relationships, the relationships in which those older men help those young boys to discover who they are and give them security and safety and provide them with love and a reliable and sort of a rock where they can't speak to their parents. Some of those relationships are some of the most
station to me.
And yet here you are talking about how, look, you know, some of these kids that get diddled by these priests, I mean, it's a good thing for them. They're getting this love. And now they are also getting
You're misunderstanding what pedophilia means. Pedophilia is not a sexual attraction to somebody 13 years old who is sexually mature. Pedophilia is attraction to children. To children who have not reached puberty. Pedophilia is attraction to people who don't have functioning sex organs yet, who have not gone through puberty, who are too young to be able to understand the way their bodies. That is not what we're talking about.
And you are advocating for cross-generational relationships here. Can we be honest about that?
Yeah, I don't mind admitting that, and I think particularly in the gay world and outside the Catholic Church, if that's where some of you want to go with this, I think in the gay world, some of the most important, enriching, and incredibly, life-affirming, important, shaping relationships, very often between younger boys and older men, can be hugely positive experiences.
He tried to use his own experience as an example. Basically, he said, like, when I was 13, I was definitely mature enough to consent. He also specifically stated that paedophilia is not a sexual attraction to somebody 13 years old who is sexually mature, but that paedophilia is an attraction to children who have not reached puberty, which is true, but should be irrelevant. And I think it's interesting that people point that out a lot when they're defending their attraction to children. Still children, still an attraction to children. He got pushback from the hosts, thankfully, and he stated, I think the age of consent law is probably about right. That is probably roughly the right age. But there are certainly people who are capable of giving consent at a younger age. I consider myself to be one of them. When this got the inevitable backlash that of course it did, he said that he had been a victim of child abuse and that this was humour and a way to deal... It basically, again, he sort of said it was satire. It's his satire argument, but applying it to traumatic personal experiences. Now, I am a believe the victim first kind of person. However much I strongly, strongly dislike the individual we're discussing, and however awful their views on anything are, I just think we should trust the victim first. So I'm not going to say that maybe it wasn't true, whatever, we don't know. Defending the thing that happened to you in this kind of way is not an uncommon or unexpected reaction if that does happen to somebody. But he was never sorry. He explicitly said he wasn't sorry. He said that it was sarcasm and humour, which is just a lie, because it wasn't. He was speaking seriously. There's absolutely nothing to indicate that he was joking. His replying back that the age of consent is probably just about right, but I just meant this and that, and defining paedophilia. None of that makes sense if he was being sarcastic or joking, because he wasn't. So he lied about it afterwards. He refused to apologise. He said, "No one can tell me or anyone else who has lived through sexual abuse how to deal with those emotions," which is a statement that I 100% agree with in any other situation, and I think a lot of people who have suffered abuse or trauma of any kind do get heavily criticised for the way in which they deal with it. Same with mental health issues and stuff. There's a lot of stigma around there, and I actually think that's true. I agree. But as a public figure, appearing on a public platform, he has a responsibility not to promote that, because that can then harm future children. That's going to harm other people. He did apologise to other people who have suffered abuse if his comments hurt them, so there is that. But overall, it was a disaster. It was a career-ending disaster for him. This was basically when he started to fall off the radar. It was not his last controversy. In June 2018, reports surfaced that Yiannopoulos had told at least 2 news organisations who had requested comments that he wanted vigilantes to shoot journalists. According to a reporter for the New York Observer, he wrote in a text message, "I can't wait for vigilante squads to start gunning down journalists on site." 2 days later, there was a shooting at the Capital Gazette in Maryland, where 5 people were killed. It's a stretch to say he's responsible. The best you can say about it is the timing is deeply unfortunate. But again, he was not apologetic. One more time, he said it was a joke. It was just humour. Apparently texting news organisations and saying, "I hope your reporters get gunned down," is just a bit of fun British humour. This is the other thing that frustrates me, is he keeps saying British humour throughout his whole history of controversies. He's used the idea of British humour, which is deadpan and sarcastic and sometimes doesn't translate well to an American audience. But his comments aren't humour. That's not British humour. Being like, "Ha ha ha, I want the press to die violently." That's not British humour. If you're ever wondering what British humour is, it's not that. He basically went on the defensive like, "Oh, the news is being mean to me because I sent joke text," as opposed to being remorseful about his remarks lining up with actual violent killing of the press. I know it's like a difficult line to walk because, okay, humour is subjective and everybody says things in anger. Everybody in the world, especially if you consider them to be like a troll or a hater, it's very easy to give in to that. But if nothing else, this is a great example of why wishing violent death on groups of people is just not a good idea anytime. Every single time he's called out for some controversy, for some shocking behaviour, he is absolutely unapologetic. That's the thing. Imagine if you were a journalist, you received that kind of message, and then you lost peers or friends like days later to that exact thing. That would feel fucking devastating. And Yiannopoulos doesn't care. He's like, "How's this going to affect my image? I'll just use this to say that the mainstream press is against me." Fucking disgusting. Let's talk about the ex-gay thing. 2017, Yiannopoulos, now a resident of the USA, marries his husband in Hawaii. It's a very publicised thing. It's something that he's very proud of. Blah, blah, blah. 2021, he comes out as ex-gay. Apparently leading up to this, obviously I don't follow him or read his books, but according to Yiannopoulos, he was dropping hints about coming out as straight in his books. He was posting on Telegram X days without sodomy. This is part of his spiritual journey. Oh god, I hate it so much. He did this interview where he basically came out and said, I only pretended to be gay to annoy the liberals. Having gay sex and getting gay married just to own the libs is a step further than I've ever seen. I only leaned heavily into it in public because it drove liberals crazy to see a handsome, charismatic, intelligent gay man riotously celebrating conservative principles. Handsome, charismatic, intelligent, humble.
When I made my announcement, the first thing that happened, which will make you laugh, but it's true, is dogs stopped barking at me. This is just how I think that God reveals himself to us.
This whole thing was incredibly overdramatic. There's no question that at least the way he did it was absolutely for public attention. It was a desperate plea to become relevant again. I don't know, and once again, I think it's better to just assume that people are telling the truth. I know that that might be a bit naive in some cases. The only reason I'm questioning it here is because of Yiannopoulos' history of flinging back and forth between gay and ex-gay and whatever. Generally, I think you should trust whoever is telling you on what their sexuality is. It's unclear, though, whether he was always straight and he got married as a publicity stunt. Maybe it was a long game so that his divorce would be part of the publicity stunt. It just seems to me like, I don't know, I mean, people do get married for bad reasons, but getting married to a man and then still living with him and paying for his lifestyle. He talks about, like, you know, I can afford to keep him in a new Porsche every year. If you weren't really gay or you didn't really love someone, would you do that? But then, is it just that he is Christian ex-gay, in that he's still gay and still loves his partner? Or, you know, whatever, relationships are another question that is impossible to guess. But maybe he's still gay, but he's doing the whole Christian ex-gay thing of, you know, fighting temptation. Because after this, he set up his own clinic? Yeah, he calls it a clinic. I don't know what specifically it is or does, but he opened a clinic in Florida for men plagued by same-sex attraction. Specifically, he's been backing and campaigning for conversion therapy. I find it very hard to believe that he's straight. I think that it would be very difficult to pretend to be sexually attracted to men for that long. It just seems crazy, to the point of getting married. I don't think that's possible. I don't think he's straight. I think most likely he's a hardcore far-right, self-hating Christian gay. I think probably the truth is closer to what he purports. Absolutely everything around his marriage, his divorce, his setting up a clinic, it's all totally for publicity. He wants to be relevant. So he went very quiet after all of this. He survived quite a number of controversies, getting banned off of social media and things like this, resigning from Breitbart even after his questionable comments about children, and he disappeared into relative obscurity. Here's where I think it might be my fault that he's back. We had some friends stay recently from the US and we were chatting politics, as happens. This was maybe 4 days ago. We were talking about Milo Yiannopoulos and laughing, gently deriding the fact that the only place he's been seen publicly since all of those controversies happened was on Christian shopping channels selling statues of the Virgin Mary.
So it's 11 3/4 inches tall. If you're thinking about how this is going to fit into your shrine or maybe even a bedside table. I know sometimes people like to wake up and say good morning to their favorite, people and saints and whatnot.
I explicitly said how glad I was, and what a relief it is that he's not, at least he's not in the public eye anymore. Days later, this news comes out. I think I'm cursed. It's not massively surprising. They have an enormous amount of things in common. Recently, she's been calling for an end to Pride Month. She was one of the ones that spread the lie that the Texas shooter was cross-dressing and was trans, which is super weird. So it doesn't surprise me. This is what she said to the Daily Beast when she was asked for comment. I have an intern that was by a priest as a young teen, was gay, has offended everyone at some point, turned his life back to Jesus and church, and changed his life. Great story. The problem with that is that she's so excited that he's had such a terrible, terrible experience. She's really like, yes, he had a dreadful experience. He's really offended a lot of people. But Jesus, pretty awesome. The other problem is that he's always had Jesus in his life. For all of his controversies, he hasn't turned back to Jesus. He just started using the word spiritual more after he went ex-gay. He always had Jesus. As long as he was doing all the terrible things, as long as he made all the awful statements, he was doing that pro-Christianity. Specifically pro-Christianity, because the entire time he was campaigning against same-sex marriage and things like that. He campaigned against a vote in Australia on same-sex marriage because he thought it would hurt religious freedoms. Obviously, he did get gay married, but since he then got gay divorced, who knows? Who even knows? So, I don't know. That's who Milo Yiannopoulos is. That's why this is so fucking weird. Like, I don't know how to say this without sounding like an absolute dick. I think it's okay because he's horrible. So being a bit more rude and spicy is okay because he's not only threatened people with death, but he's condemned people's deaths on, like, when there was a mosque shooting. He basically said, this is the West's fault for being too nice to Muslims. Like, that's the level we're at. He doesn't like women, he doesn't like gays, he's a self-hating gay. So I think it's probably okay for me to say that he's kind of a fucking no one. Like, Milo Yiannopoulos got his fame from being controversial, not from being a particularly engaging speaker or a brilliant writer. It was from picking the most controversial stories from his neo-Nazi associates. That's what got him his fame. He's not done anything. He's not qualified in anything. We know that the only education he's done, he's always been kicked out or dropped out of. Like, there's nothing to qualify him for this internship. But then I don't know what an intern to a congresswoman does. What do summer interns do? I would love it if he's fucking running the coffee and, like, photocopying stuff. That would be so fucking funny. Otherwise, it makes no fucking sense to me as a choice. Purely as a stoke the political fires, I kinda get it, but I think even up to a certain point of right-leaning people, like, he's really alt-right. I feel like it's crazy. I feel like you're specifically appealing to a very narrow group of hardcore Christian, far-right edgelords, really. And I don't know if that's a group wide enough to make that a good decision. Is it just to make Marjorie Taylor Greene sound better in comparison? But then that doesn't really work because she's the one that's hired him, so I don't know. What do you think? Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you're in a state of bafflement like me, because what the fuck is happening in the world? As PC Myers said when he shared this news, this timeline is increasingly insane. We are in the worst timeline. It's so crazy that I'm not, like, upset. I just think it's funny. I just think it's so absurd that it's funny. I am disappointed that Yiannopoulos is back in the public eye. I mean, I'm talking about him, so I'm as guilty as anyone of bringing him to attention. But when, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is hiring you, I mean, that's a lot more publicity than I'm giving him, you know what I mean? And I think that's a shame. I'll leave links to all of the things that I read down below. I read a lot of articles just to confirm that this was a real thing and to just reread Yiannopoulos' history, the controversies that he's been involved in, to be like, yeah, that's definitely this guy. It's just fucking weird. If you've watched up to this point, thank you so much. You're a gem. If you missed my update video from like a week ago, we are now going to do videos every other Wednesday, so this is the first kind of official one of those. While there's a lot of kind of skeptic stuff woven into this story, it's more kind of politics based, so that's going to be the thing for Wednesdays. Saturdays, every week as normal, specifically skeptic themed content. every other Wednesday, for now, something that falls maybe slightly more outside of that box. So I hope you enjoyed, as much as you can enjoy this kind of story. This crazy life change, making more content, is only possible thanks to you, the lovely viewer, for watching and engaging with this content. Do leave a like, do comment if you have thoughts. If you don't, just put ha 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 ha, or something like that. I don't know, you can come up with something better than I can. I've got to give a special shout out to the lovelies over on Patreon. You guys are so amazing, so supportive. None of these changes would be possible without you. I'm so grateful. With that said, let me give a shout out to my giant chickens over on Patreon. A very confused looking badger, Alltag, Amalgam of Neuroses, Amber, April Washburn, Asku, Baked Bads, Bert Whitehead, Brian B, Cackles the Spoopy Newbie, Chantail, Charlie Edwins, Chris Simpson, Connie Wright, Conla, Chicken Maximus Lyons, goddammit Conla, Curious Quacker, Daftwood, Dave Kircher, Denny5252, Dr. Mint, Drefford, Eamon Sheridan, L, Falcor the Ginger, Faye the Succubus, Flash Prez Blue Wolf, Fulcrum, Gaming Ridge, Gay of Reckoning, George Bush, Gravy, Henry Curtis, Izzy, Jan Bojarp, Jason Metcalf, Jeremy Buck, Joe Rowe, John Fry, John Smith, Kent Woodward, Kike, Kiwi Satan, Christian Varga, Lizzie Gale, Mark Threlfall, Mattis McChicken Nuggetus, Miles Tegg, Mr. Creosote, Nerd Fiction, Neve Coughlin, Ninja Red, Piao Meow Noir, Peter Kerouac, Plux, Psyched Dude, Razbatom, Rosina Keller, RPG MP3, Sarah Shavy, Sean, Silly Christie, Simping on Emma Thorne, Seriously, Tysau, Tanklow, Taxman, The Shropshire Lad, Thomas Philomeyer, Timothy Avery, Tracy O'Rourke, Valerie, Wasatch Witch, Zabba and Zeroless. Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. Have a very lovely week, and I will see you really soon.